The video which you are about to see is an account of the tragedy which befell a YouTuber called Pixelbush. It is all the more tragic in that he was actually having quite a good time playing Dead by Daylight. In fact, he had just gotten the twins to Prestige 100. But even had he endured very, very bad times, he could not have expected nor would he have wished to see as much of the mad and macabre as he was to see in the new game. For him, an idyllic early autumn break from the normal working grind became a nightmare. The events of that game were to lead to the creation of one of the most bizarre videos in the annals of YouTube history, on the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Welcome, friends and foes, family and victims. No, that doesn't sound right at all. Let's talk about the new ASIM horror game by veterans of the subgenre Gun Interactive, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the game. So, it's all the rage, it's the game everyone's talking about, and I'm probably late to the party covering it right now. Since I sent my access key to the tech test mere hours before the game's server was due to close, I barely got to play the game's first showing back in May, even though they did extend it by a day, and thanks to my PC breaking, I missed the game's release too. Meaning, until I got to finally play Texas Chainsaw a few weeks after it came out, all I knew about the game was what my friends and fellow creators had told me. And the early signs were good. Really good, actually. The game was making serious waves in the first few days to a week, and it all looked very good. But while I was waiting for my PC repairs, I noticed opinions starting to fray. Antipathy started to build, with some players saying the game had lost its luster for them almost immediately, and others saying the DBD players had a toxic attitude seeping into the community and ruining the experience of playing for everybody else. There's been responses and responses to responses, there's been shit-slinging and tribalism, and devs getting mardy on the subreddit. But surely there's something left for me to unpack here. Because when I see Texas Chainsaw, I see two distinctly separate challenges that the devs at Gun had to overcome when making it.
Licensed games have to do two things to be considered an unequivocal success. They have to be authentic as an adaptation of the source material, and whether in spirit or in image, feel like part of the franchise. And by some metric, they have to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. It doesn't really matter what that metric is, it just has to, on some level, be a, good game. That is a hard duality to hit, and in short, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre gets one of these absolutely perfectly, and the other, I'd say it has some difficulties. So let's talk about it.
1974 saw the release of Tobe Hooper's classic of horror cinema, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it became probably one of the most influential horror films of all time. Only Alien, Scream, and Halloween can really compare to the way Texas Chainsaw's approach to unpolished, scrappy realism went on to define horror cinema for the decades that followed. While it wasn't itself a grindhouse film per se, it brought tropes and images that you'd expect to see in grindhouse horror into the mainstream, and basically the entire exploitation of horror subgenre since then owed something to Chainsaw. The House of a Thousand Corpses, The Hills Have Eyes, Hostel, even My Baby Saw. Gun had a massive undertaking when it came to trying to capture that lightning in a bottle, and it's safe to say they've done a fantastic job. When you read the game's premise, it immediately screams Texas Chainsaw, a 3v4 ASIM where victims stored in the Sawyer's meat larder have to escape the property before Leatherface and his oddball family of psychopaths literally have them for dinner. Well, I say Sawyer, but thanks to the involvement of Kim Henkel, the co-wrote the original film and the writer or producer who most of the sequels, I guess they're the Slaughter family this time around. The easy option for Wes Keltner and his team at Gun was clearly just to have Leatherface as a solitary killer role in the vein of Dead by Daylight, since he's the real draw to the franchise. But sticking him alongside his family, Nubbins and Drayton from the first film, plays the Texas Chainsaw's strength as a film and an IP. What made the first two films so memorable, and what many of the recent cinematic revival attempts Texas Chainsaw have missed out on, is Leatherface's role as part of a family dynamic. Leatherface on his own is just a big, silent, violent guy with a chainsaw. But it's how his family treats him and how he enables their cruelty as a big blood instrument that gave the first film its bite and created many of its most memorable scenes. I'm really glad Gunn went to the effort of bringing the whole family into the game instead of just Bubba, and it isn't like they half-assed it either. Leatherface and the rest of his family are brought to life pretty amazingly, with each of them coming with their own abilities and playstyles that evoke their characters from the film. The cook, Drayton, is the support and kind of the team leader, tracking down victims and locking doors to cut off escape routes, but doesn't hit too hard since he's just a crotchety old man, really. The hitchhiker Nubbins is nimble and scrappy, squeezing through tight gaps and placing traps to hamper the victim's progress and kick them while they're down. He's spasmodically animated just like Edwin Neal's unforgettable performance in the movie, and Neal not only came back to voice him again, but also did the opening narration for the game. The new voice actors for the other two old-timers sound similar enough to the original voice work, and the likenesses are pretty good too. All in all, a faithful recreation. The rest of the cast are Gunn original characters, made specifically for the game in a similar way to the majority of the camp counselors in Gunn's other asymmetrical horror game, Friday the 13th. Set before the events of the first film, our plucky cast of victims are hot on the trail of one Maria Flores, a young girl who went missing on the Slaughter property, and her friends and sister Anna, who went to find her, end up getting a little more than they bargained for. The victims wind up in Bubba's basement where, grievously injured, they have to limp out of the property to safety before the family catches them and gives them the old slaughterhouse treatment. The basement is dingy, ramshackle and full of junk, the kind of place you'd expect exists under an old house run by people who are too focused on killing and eating trespassers to invest in interior decoration. But it's the upstairs environments that absolutely steal the show with this game. There are 3 maps: the gas station, slaughterhouse and the family residence, and each one is just stunning. The slaughterhouse's original location, divided by the folks at Gunn, and it's exceedingly gorgeous. The overgrown yard outside, the lean-to leading to the basement, Grandpa's little roof lounge where he can sun himself, feels distinct from the established locations that existed in the films, while still being in keeping with their designs and ideas. And the other 2 maps, God, I just love these. The house is obviously the star of the show. The inside is claustrophobic and surprisingly easy to get lost in despite its small size. The exterior is this gorgeous summer evening vista that captures the arable backwaters of rural Texas masterfully. And while the gas station is a less memorable location with a few more liberties taken, it's still recognisably Drayton's gas station, and with its more ramshackle look, feels distinct both from the ruined industrial slaughterhouse and the oppressive tightness of the family house. If there's any one thing to praise the devs of this game for, it's the amazing environment design. Truly staggering work. The loyalty to dutifully rebuilding the world of Texas Chainsaw is carried on in things like the UI, which is styled with block capitals and simple drawings in the style of 70s newspaper headlines or perhaps even road signs. And the music and sound design are just as evocative. They even use the same model of chainsaw that was used in the first film to authentically capture that engine sound. It is brilliant. Go check out the Capturing the Sound of Horror behind the scenes footage by Gunn, by the way. It was pretty good to see them trying to reconstruct it all. The amazing environment and sound design lead to palpable tension in a lot of moments. If you hear that chainsaw revving and heading in your direction, find yourself hiding mere inches from the family member on the hunt, or sprint pell-mell across the open driveway as you run for your life, it feels very authentic to the stark and unforgettable horror of the original film.
When you land into that basement and for the first time ask yourself not, where am I? Or, is that Leatherface I can hear? But what can I do to escape? The spell is broken. Texas Chainsaw has lost some of its magic, and there's no getting it back.
I'm not gonna beat about the bush here. The experience of playing Texas Chainsaw degrades in quality really, really fast. And it showcases the difficulty of making a properly good replayable horror game. Once the horror tension subsides, you know where things are and what you and the other players are capable of. So it falls to the core gameplay loop to keep the game fun and replayable, and truth be told, Texas Chainsaw's core gameplay loop isn't conducive to replayability. I'm not going to go so far as to call it bad, because that depends on what your priorities are and your perspective, but Texas Chainsaw isn't a game that really has a ton of depth to it that would make replaying a rewarding experience. The game doesn't have a mechanical learning curve for any character barring maybe Leatherface. The low number of maps and characters means the variance between matches is fairly low, and most of the time, victims interacting with the family is highly discouraged, meaning the process of escaping gets more linear the more experienced you become. The more you play Texas Chainsaw and the better you become things at navigation and efficiently using your time, the more repetitive the game becomes because there's less time and space for interesting things to happen. And I'm not even really talking about the speedrunning, escape in 90 seconds type of gamers. I just mean the normal gameplay loop of playing a match out, which you will naturally get better at over time because that's just how human brains work. You get better at things you do the more you do them, even if you don't immediately notice it. The sign of somebody who's good at Victim in Texas Chainsaw Massacre can be measured in two respects: how quickly they can get the objectives done, and how well they can survive against a family member in a chase. And both of these are pretty much entirely reliant on good map knowledge. You've got to know where the doors and unlock tools are to get out, and you've got to know where chase resources are like crawl spaces and multiple tables to last in a chase. But once you get to them, there's no real skill or gameplay to using them. More often than not, the family member chasing you has no way to interact with the chase resources, and if they do, it'll take them a while to shimmy through or behind you, or get rid of the crawl space or multiple table, meaning you get a ton of free distance to get to the next one. This creates a lot of situations where aligned resources mean that in a 1v1, the victim is effectively invulnerable, and a second family member will have to be called in to help who might be better suited to deal with the obstacles at hand. This means that once the victims know the layout of the map decently well, family members chasing them will often need help to kill you, which to be fair does make sense given that death is permanent in this game. You've got one life, so you've got to be able to sell it dearly. But thinking about the implications this has on gameplay, it's where things start to get really interesting, because there's a concept that Texas Chainsaw players and developers alike have latched themselves onto that is well intentioned but is ultimately doing more harm than good to the discourse surrounding the game. Texas Chainsaw's allegedly casual nature and the friction players are experiencing around that intended casual experience. Players and devs of Texas Chainsaw have both been very explicit with their intentions for the game. They've both said Chainsaw is meant to be a casual experience, designed around fun rather than competitive balancing, and I understand the appeal of that. It's the kind of thing a lot of DBD players have been begging for, and for many Texas Chainsaw enthusiasts, it seemed like the answer to their prayers.
What we don't lean into is the competitive side of it, because it starts to breed a different type of player. It's not one that's right or wrong. It skews off of friendship sometimes. It starts to create a different atmosphere that doesn't fit into what I think the game's supposed to be, or even the IP itself.
But more and more there's been complaints of players ruining that experience for each other, speedrunning escapes, or playing extra ruthlessly in ways that ruin that fun, casual experience by treating it like a competitive game. Some have blamed it on Dead by Daylight players trashing Chainsaw for everybody else by bringing their own toxic mindsets to the poor innocent Chainsaw game.
We all know what happens when a meta versus meta scenario is created. The developers are forced to balance the game to a T over and over and over again, and due to the nature of this asymmetrical genre, this is a 3v4 game, it is going to probably be almost impossible to make it perfectly balanced. If this optimization, coming up to optimization, is first initiated and then provoked from the Dead by Daylight community due to this competitive mentality that has been brought over to TCM, we might just end up with two games that are basically Dead by Daylight.
And others would have blamed it on human nature, as we will inherently optimize our strategies because winning a game makes us feel good.
You know, all the stuff that the game is currently having issues with right now. But I don't think that's a Dead by Daylight player problem. That's just a human nature problem. Because at the end of the day, in 2023, if someone is playing a game and you give them the option to lose the game or the option to win the game, they're going to choose win every single time. That's just basic human nature. It feels better winning than losing.
While both these ideas have at least some merit, I think there's a lot of stuff in Texas Chainsaw itself that encourages optimization. This drive towards treating the game competitively that the devs did not intend for. Wes Keltner might have told you that he wasn't looking to make a competitive game, but you look at Chainsaw and there's a lot of features and gameplay elements that make me ask, are you sure you haven't made a competitive game? Because it kind of looks like you have. Take the example earlier of multiple family members having to work together to take down a single victim at a safe setup. If you're playing family and you need a helping hand, the best way, and really the only way to get that help, is to use the game's voice comm system to call somebody over to help. Your location's even named in the top corner for you so you can call it out more easily. Yeah, you could use the in-game text chat, but there's no guarantee it'll be read, or by the right person, and it'll take a while to type, and even then it's only on PC anyway. And the inbuilt aura reading only gets you so far. You've got to just call it out and hope somebody comes to help you, and this is a great example of where the game's allegedly casual nature starts to fall apart. To play this casual, funny, goofy party game, you need to be on constant voice comms to get help from your teammates, or the other side sometimes becomes invincible, which encourages you to play with pre-mates and use regular callouts like a competitive team would. Hell, that's more coordination required in solo queue in Dead by Daylight or Evil Dead. You've got to see how that's inherently more competitively minded than many would have you believe. It's a gameplay mechanism that punishes you for not being optimised, which is more or less the antithesis of what Wes pertains to want for the game. To play as family in Texas Chainsaw solo queue, you need a standard of voice communications on par with or exceeding the comms needed for many actual esports games like Counter-Strike or Overwatch played at the same level. Like, this is meant to be a casual game, but you've got to see the disconnect here, right? There's a great comparison worth making here to show how inherently competitive this game is, and you're pleased to know it isn't DBD or even Evil Dead. It's TCM's own predecessor game, Gun Media's ASIM debut, Friday the 13th the game. Friday the 13th was a 1v7 game where one player was randomly assigned to play Jason, and the rest would be counsellors trying to survive him, and F13, despite its issues, was rapidly successful as a casual play experience before licensing issues forced the game into extinction. The casual success wasn't because the devs asked nicely, "Please don't optimize our game," but by the game's own design features that actually resisted optimization. Jason being chosen at random meant that loading in as a coordinated team with a plan wasn't just punished, but was practically impossible. Since you could load in as your pre-made comp squad ready to bully the killer or whatever, but then one of you gets Jason and you're shit out of luck. In addition, the map's objective spawns were extremely RNG based, meaning you couldn't really optimize finding the things you needed. You had to go through everything manually. And Jason was immensely lethal, to the point that if he found you and you didn't have a pocket knife to defend yourself with, you're pretty much toast. This made the game almost impossible to optimize, because no matter how prepared you were, anything could go wrong, including you just playing the other side by complete accident. Texas Chainsaw, on the other hand, basically demands teamwork and coordination on the family side for the game to be remotely playable. It's relatively low on RNG, meaning you can rush objectives more efficiently than F13 ever let you do, and due to the high density of safe chase resources, map knowledge becomes much more important since it can basically render you invincible on command in a lot of 1v1 situations. The impact of learning things in Texas Chainsaw Massacre is massive, and it isn't even too hard to do either. So it'll always push you towards the more competitive end because you're encouraged to solve problems in a way that a competitive player would, through game knowledge and communication, rather than necessarily engaging with the other side in an interactive manner. The game is in a very odd dichotomy, where knowing what you're doing and where you're going is kind of the only skill expression you have most of the time, so the only real way to improve is doing that thing faster or more efficiently. It both makes the game push in a more competitive direction that rewards practice and coordination, and limits the game's replay value because of the consistency that getting good at the game presents to you. Both sides lack outplay potential against each other, which makes the gameplay super linear and lowers variance, which further rewards the rote learning of competitive approach. The only time I think Chainsaw works as a casual game is when you're playing solo victim with little or no comms, because then the game kind of works as intended. By playing on your own, you can make the game as casual as you want to. If you want to play super immersed, then you can. Since there isn't much interaction between victims, your team isn't really going to suffer for it. Doing this, the feeling of being truly 1v3, trying to escape the family, is preserved way better than playing as a coordinated group. I think the solo victim experience is pretty much the thing holding this game together, but once you start getting comms involved, either for efficiency's sake as the victim's side, or out of necessity playing family, you're on that road to competitive optimization whether you want to or not. And don't get me wrong, if you're finding enjoyment of the game and a fun, breezy, casual experience, good for you. Like, seriously, that's fantastic. I'm glad the game is doing for you what you want it to. But we shouldn't be surprised that a game that inherently rewards a competitive approach and punishes uncoordinated or directionless gameplay as hard as this one will encourage competitively minded players, and players are not at fault for doing this, even if devs and streamers are giving you stink cards while you do it. Okay, so Texas has issues functioning as a truly replayable and truly casual experience. But given it has a lot of competitive features, you might think it works better as a competitive game, right? Well, for a game to be successfully competitive, it has to be somewhat balanced, and lol no, absolutely not, because unfortunately for everybody else, Connie and Leland exist. Connie's ability lets her breeze through objectives in a fraction of the time, and Leland lets them stun a family member for, let me just get the stopwatch out here, way too fucking long. especially considering it's stacked with things like door stuns and bone scrap stuns. Like if Texas is meant to be a stealth and sneaking game, why do victims have so many safety tools to the point they can stun lock a family member for like a minute and a half? Or why can Connie find tools and open locks so fast that she can get the team out of the basement before family members have control over their characters? This game that's home to many systems that massively encourage optimized play becomes almost unplayable when it's optimized. Outside of a specific meridian where victims know what they're doing but haven't optimized that gameplay pattern yet, the game just doesn't work. And that's not even going into the issues the game has outside of the gameplay loop itself. For example, Texas Chainsaw has effectively no tutorial. It has these short clips or still images from the game with these captions, but these don't actually help you in any meaningful way once you actually get into your first match.
Everyone's just escaping. Everyone just gets out of the basement and they rush the exit and the game's over. And it's like, well, that'll happen every time if you're not like securing the property. And you're like, what do you mean? We're like, look at the first millisecond that the game starts. We hit you on the screen to say, secure the property, do these things. So people are just not looking at that, which I guess shouldn't be that big of a surprise, right? Like people don't do tutorials, people don't read instructions, they don't read anything on the internet.
Read? Yes, Wes, I couldn't agree more. Clearly the right way to do this was obviously the hour-long PowerPoint presentation format. I'm sure that's going to get people involved in a tutorial.
It is easily the worst new player onboarding I've seen from a game in ages, and it doesn't stop there. On PC, the game has no way to deactivate motion blur, and an anti-cheat so dysfunctional it makes Brexit seem strong and stable. What really rankles me about the anti-cheat in particular is that the vulnerabilities that are being abused were found by cheaters in the tech test, which explains why cheats were being used day one. But instead of patching up these vulnerabilities before release, Gun just turned off crossplay between PC and console to quarantine the problem, and allowed lobbies to fill with only 6 players to try and mitigate the bad queue times and lobby dodging, meaning playing on PC has become kinda crappy for a little while now. This is exacerbated by the fact that on the family side, one player must play Leatherface, and due to his vulnerability to getting stun locked 24/7, that isn't very popular, so players dodging lobbies or not picking the correct characters if Leatherface is something they're forced onto playing. To cut a long story short, saying Texas Chainsaw Massacre as a game has some teething problems, it would be an insult to babies across the world. And that just leaves us with one very big question. Do I have enough faith in Gun to expect this to change anytime soon? Truthful answer is, I don't know. On one hand, Gun are doing lots of things in an attempt to make their game land well, pushing out bug fixes, balance updates, and other attempted fixes frequently in an attempt to get things back under control. To their credit, they're definitely working hard, and things like the cheater issue I doubt are going to be around for much longer. But that's to say nothing about the gameplay loop problems. The fact that so many people are whining about the game being optimised when the game encouraged optimisation at its core, especially if you're playing family. I've noticed something rather unsettling about this game's community, and it reminds me a lot of Video Horror Society, God rest its soul, where the notion of making the game better by providing constructive balance suggestion or suggesting that the game inherently encourages optimization at the cost of casual experience has a habit of not going well. And among other things, it was this refusal to address the real issues with the game because of the toxic positivity that pushed critical voices away from the game and its community that resulted in the death of VHS. The official subreddit for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is a common place players go to voice their feedback, is moderated by devs at Gun, who have a habit of not handling criticism in the most grace. I've been somebody who suggests taking the language we use to criticize game dev decisions in a new direction, and I never ever encourage abusing devs at all, but I'm sorry, if you're gonna get all internet tough guy because players aren't happy with the $40 game that they just paid for not working properly almost a month after it came out, you're providing a really bad public image for yourself, your dev team, and your game. It drives people with actual criticism out of the official channels and may render you blind to criticisms that would otherwise be very useful to improve your game. Not to mention that depending on the moderator's relationships with Gun and what they're being paid to do, they might be breaking Reddit's user agreement by taking payment for moderation actions, which kind of puts the validity and even existence of the subreddit in jeopardy, which, also not great.
This might sound like I'm being super nitpicky or harsh on the team at Gun, but I'm only as critical as I am because I know that Gun can and should be better than this. Wes Keltner is the only man in the world right now who can claim that he's made a groundbreaking new asym horror game twice. If anyone should know better about making a robust and replayable gameplay loop, about managing a community that's deeply driven between two sides, or dealing with the consequences of gameplay decisions that give an option to one side that becomes insufferable for the other side, it's him and his team at Gun. This isn't a VHS situation, where a tiny team of 4 developers didn't realise how big their game was going to get until it was already taking off. These guys were sending goodie bags out to Dead by Daylight content creators. They knew exactly what they were doing, they knew exactly the audience they were courting, and they knew the level of scrutiny that their game would end up being put under. I'm harsh on them because they know better than this, or at least they should. And they're big enough and ugly enough that they should be able to live with some cutting criticism from me, because at the end of the day, all I'm doing is holding them to the standards that they should be held to, that they knew they were going to get held to.
The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the game, is weird. I can't really call it a bad game, with its beyond gorgeous visual style, the map design, and the extreme dedication to recreating the authentic Texas Chainsaw Massacre experience. But with the unenthusing and shallow gameplay loop, replayability and balance issues, and lack of basic accessibility features, I can't really call it a good one either. I'm glad it seems to have caught on and found an audience. Genuinely, if you're having fun with the game, then good on you. Gun looks to be making some actual good changes and are pushing out patch notes at a rate of knots, so it looks like actual work is being done to improve the game. I think it's very telling that all the people throwing hissy fits about prioritising balance over fun have become rather silent with Gun's measures taken to balance the game. It's almost like this process is necessary for a live service game to function properly, especially if it's as poorly balanced as Chainsaw. I'm really glad that this game has found an enthusiastic audience. I know I'm just not one of them though. Avid viewers have probably heard this from me over and over again and are getting tired of it, but this thing just isn't for me, and that's okay. If you like it, I hope you keep having fun with it. And well, if you don't, I have a recommendation for you if you want to try another asymmetrical horror game from a titan of horror history with a sharp but rewarding learning curve, a ton of skill expression on both sides with plenty to master, charming characters that are faithful to the adaptation, and a feel that accurately evokes the crazy, blood-splattered history of the original source material. There's a groovy little game out there that, despite being a thoroughly excellent experience, could really use some more players. So maybe give it a go. It's a really fun game, and I'm sure an update's coming to it soon. Oh, fuck. Well, at least the new Skull Workshop rework is absolutely amazing, so watch this space. I'm going to be covering that very, very soon. I guess I'll see you around.